Welcome to our deep dives today. We're going to be exploring this whole world of negative news. We know a lot of you have been feeling overwhelmed by the negativity out there, and we really want to help you guys understand why it's so prevalent and, more importantly, what you can do about it. So today we're going to dive into the psychology, the fascinating psychology behind why negative news just dominates everything and how you can, kind of navigate this challenging world of information without having to sacrifice your own mental well-being.
Yeah, I think a great place to start with this is with negativity bias. It's this tendency we have in our brains to zero in on threats,
Mm.
on dangers. It's something that helped our ancestors a long time ago when they were, trying to survive out in the wild, avoid predators. But today, in our modern world, it means that we're kind of primed for the worst case scenario.
So it's not that the world is actually just falling apart. It's that our brains are almost designed to zoom in on the bad stuff first.
That's a really good way to put it. If you think about scrolling through your social media feed, you've got to mix and post, right? Some are positive, some are neutral, and then there's some negative ones. And chances are your eyes are going to go to the negative ones first. It's like our brains have this alarm system that goes off whenever there's a hint of danger or trouble.
It's like you always hear, if it bleeds, it leads. And, we're all drawn to that drama and conflict, the things that could be a potential threat. And I feel like the media knows this, right?
Oh, they absolutely know this. This is not a new thing at all. Publishers and broadcasters, they've known this for a long time. Back in the day, they would notice that stories about conflict, scandals, disasters, those were the ones that sold papers. They were really catering to our negativity bias, even before we knew what negativity bias was.
Makes total sense. Like from a business perspective, right? If you want to grab people's attention, if you want people to be talking about things, you're going to play up the negativity.
For sure. And as media has changed and grown, this has become even more true. We've got this 24/7 news cycle now, constant competition for our attention online. There's so much pressure to create content that triggers our emotions, and negativity tends to do that much more effectively than positivity does.
So we've got this perfect storm here. Our brains are wired for negativity. The media wants to play up all the drama. And we're just swimming in this constant sea of information. All of it's trying to get our attention. I mean, where do we even begin to reclaim our mental space?
I think the first thing is to understand how this constant exposure to negative news is really affecting us. We're talking about real consequences for our mental and physical health. There's even a term for it, headline stress disorder. Studies show that being exposed to negative news over and over can lead to anxiety, depression, even physical things like headaches and just feeling tired all the time.
Wait, so reading all the bad stuff
Yeah.
can actually make
Yeah.
us sick?
It's not quite that simple, but there is a connection there. When we're bombarded with all this negative stuff, our brains kind of go into fight or flight mode, and that releases all these stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, which if they're elevated all the time, are going to have a bunch of negative effects on our bodies.
So it's not just about feeling down or anxious. There's actually a real physical impact this is having. And I have to imagine it's not just individuals who are affected by this, right? This constant negativity must have an impact on society as a whole.
Exactly. When we're always exposed to doom and gloom, it can make you feel hopeless, cynical, makes it harder to trust each other, makes people less willing to work together on problems, and definitely less optimistic about the future. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe that the world is bad and just getting worse, we're less likely to put in the work to make it better.
This is starting to feel a little bleak. Our brains are wired for negativity. The media is making it so much worse. Our health is suffering. Our hope is dwindling. But there has to be a way out of this, right?
There is.
Now that we know the problem, let's start figuring out the solutions.
All right, so we talked about all these challenges, navigating a media landscape where it feels like everything is negative. But let's shift gears a bit now. Let's talk about some strategies you can actually use to reclaim your mental space. The first thing is realizing you have way more control than you think you do when it comes to the news you consume. And a big part of that is being mindful of your news sources.
So you're saying that not all news is created equal. Some outlets might be playing into that negativity bias more than others.
Exactly. Some outlets are all about the sensational. They just want to trigger those emotional responses, even if it means sacrificing accuracy or being balanced. Whereas other outlets are more focused on the facts and giving you a complete picture of what's going on.
Okay, so how can we tell the difference? How do you find those more trustworthy sources?
One thing is to look for publications that have a good reputation, for strong journalistic ethics. Make sure they're fact-checking things, see if they cite their sources, provide context, And avoid language that's super emotionally charged. Or misleading headlines. There are also groups out there that evaluate news outlets based on how credible they are and their potential biases. Those can be really helpful resources.
That's a good starting point.
Mhm.
So once we've kind of started to curate our sources a bit, what's the next step in taking control?
I think setting boundaries is huge. We're living in this world where news is available constantly, but we don't have to be plugged in 24/7. Be intentional about when you're consuming news and how it fits into your day.
I totally get that. It's so easy to just get lost scrolling through headlines, especially on social media. Any tips for how to actually set those boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, start with being aware of your habits. Notice when you tend to check the news and how it makes you feel. Maybe you find that starting or ending your day with the news puts you in a negative mood. If that's the case, try shifting it to a different time. Or just limiting yourself to checking once or twice a day, maybe at specific times. You can even set a timer to make sure you don't get sucked in.
These are really practical. I like it.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're creating a media diet, just like you would create a healthy eating plan.
I love that analogy. And just like with food, we need balance with our media too. So make sure you're balancing out all that negative stuff with things that are positive and uplifting. Find stories about people overcoming challenges, innovation, acts of kindness. Focus on the solutions to problems. That'll help you counteract the negativity bias, give you a more realistic view of the world.
We just have to make a point of finding it.
Yeah, and another powerful tool is media mindfulness. It's about being present with the news you consume, engaging with it in a more critical and discerning way.
So like be more of a detective with the news. Look for clues. Question the narrative.
You got it. Ask yourself, who created this content? What is their agenda? What might be missing from the story? Are they trying to manipulate me with their language or presenting things in a biased way?
We need to develop this healthy skepticism. Be aware of how we might be manipulated.
Absolutely. The more aware we are as consumers of information, the less vulnerable we are to that negativity bias, and the more empowered we are to make our own decisions.
Okay, so we talked about reclaiming our mental space, taking control of how we interact with the news. But what about taking control in the real world? How do we avoid that feeling of being helpless when we see all the negative things happening?
That's a great question, and I think that's where focusing on your sphere of influence comes in. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by everything, ask yourself, what can I actually do to make a difference in my own community?
So shift your focus from the things you can't control to the things you can do.
Right. Volunteer your time to a cause you care about. Support local businesses. Have those tough conversations with your neighbors. Even small actions can create a ripple effect and lead to positive change.
I feel like we've really covered a lot in this deep dive. We started with that psychology of negativity bias, and then we went through some strategies for how to deal with this crazy media world. I think the biggest takeaway for me is realizing that we're not just helpless. We actually have a lot of power over how we interact with the news and how we can protect our mental well-being.
Totally. It's about changing that mindset. It's easy to feel like negativity is just hitting you from all sides, but we have the power to choose. We can curate the news we consume, set boundaries, and practice being mindful.
And it's not just about avoiding the negative stuff. It's about really seeking out the positive. Those stories of hope and resilience, the human connection, all those things that remind us that there's good in the world too.
Absolutely. When we make an effort to find that balance, we're not just changing our own outlook, we're contributing to a better information environment for everyone.
It's like a ripple effect. When we choose to focus on the good, share those stories of hope, we inspire others to do the same.
For sure. And think about the impact that has on our families, our communities, even just our own self-talk. When we have that more balanced and hopeful perspective, it changes everything.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I really want everyone listening to walk away feeling empowered, like they can make a difference. We've talked about the challenges, and we've gone through some solutions. Now it's time to actually take action.
You got it. Remember that you have choices. Choose your news wisely. Be mindful of your thoughts. Choose to focus on the good, on hope, and on the things you can control.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all navigating this crazy information world together.
By making smart choices about how we interact with news, we can protect our mental well-being and contribute to a more balanced and hopeful world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I hope you found it helpful. And remember, the power to choose a more positive outlook starts with you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.